And let's talk about picture editing. 'Cause now that, you've got multiple flavors of Avid, you've got Final Cut Pro, you've got Adobe Premiere. How do you choose, and who should choose?
I think it's really important for the editor to be involved. I mean,
The editors always say so, but they also complain that they aren't always.
Yeah, but if you're hiring an editor and they're really only comfortable cutting on one thing, then you have to know that if you're going to impose something else, there may be problems. They may not be as, most editors now are able to jump between a lot of different systems. I mean, it's not like it used to be. When I first started, editing on those systems, the editors didn't even know how to run them. You had to have an assistant who actually did all the cutting, and the editor just told them what to do. But now everybody's pretty, proficient in most of them. So, cost is sometimes a factor. If you're doing something smaller budget, it can be less expensive to work on Premiere than on an Avid. For a while I was cutting a lot of features on Final Cut. They seem to have fallen by the wayside technically, and more people for the smaller budget movies are embracing Premiere. So some of it's just cost, really.
The only thing I will say is I agree with Steve that Final Cut's days seem to be behind us unless Apple decides to really start pushing Final Cut 10. The world now is pretty much an Avid and a Adobe Premiere world. Short form projects is where Premiere is really making big inroads. A lot of commercial, promo, corporate, web-oriented projects seem to be migrating to Premiere, which is fine. It has a lot of strengths. The fact that Adobe has a whole creative suite of products is very appealing to a lot of creative people, that the editor can make use of those additional tools very easily. So that's all great. The one thing I would caution is, if you're interested in Premiere, is that you really talk through your whole workflow and consider if you're going to be staying in that ecosystem. That Adobe ecosystem is where Premiere is most successful. If you're going to be using post-production vendors, a sound house, a post-finishing house, you just want to make certain that everything is going to work smoothly when you need to interface with those third-party vendors. Premiere is a work in progress. It's not as easy to move projects from between platforms, between facilities still. Avid still is a little
I'm
bit
just
more
going to
than-
throw out, I just did a Premiere feature last year. We had zero problem.
That's great. So that tells me that you were working with vendors that were ready for it.
At Variety, we are on Adobe Premiere because we use Adobe tools for the actual publishing of the magazine. And I got to say, we've talked about moving to Avid, and our in-house editor smiles. He says, "Well, Avid editors get paid more money."
One thing that is also important to recognize that when you make your camera choice, with your director and DP, that what the medium is that you're going to be shooting on, it's not necessarily going to be the medium that you're going to be posting on, and there's going to be a little crosstalk, and so that's not a bad thing. It's just recognizing that there are cameras that say we can record in ProRes, and then you could take that into Final Cut, and you could edit directly or natively in Premiere or other systems. But generally, most things you're going to have a shooting format, and you're going to have an editing format, and you're also going to have a deliverable, and there's just some steps involved. And so you want to make sure that with all of that, truly, that is the workflow, moving files, that they're going to talk to each other in a way that's not going to be painful, because suddenly you can have this transcode moment where oh, well, guess what? We're going to lose 2 days because all of this material has to be transcoded so that it can work in this system. So we can't actually do this until we get this material over in a format that we're going to be able to work with. Well, if you haven't planned for that one, really sucks.